Bienvenidos de nuevo, estudiantes de todo. Welcome to part 2 of this 3-part video series where we're talking about personal finance inside of Notion. And actually more than that, we're building an entire system for managing our personal finances, for seeing them, for planning them, based on the very popular budgeting personal finance app, YNAB, or You Need a Budget. In last week's video, we focused on getting the transactions database of our system in place. So that involved 2 pieces: getting the data that we want, the historical data from our financial accounts, into Notion first, and then getting it connected with our financial accounts with a live connection so that the transactions that we make on a day-to-day basis are automatically pulled into the system so we don't have to continually do that manually every single day. Now in part 2, we're going to return to that transactions database, begin to categorize our expenses according to what makes sense to us so that we're not defaulting to how Discover does it or how our bank does it. We're going to have a uniform standard for how we want to think about our expenses, apply that to our data, and then be able to begin running some basic analysis on our historical spending so that we can see how much we're spending, how much it costs us roughly to live the way that we're living, where that money is going, and then therefore identify opportunities for saving money, and more than saving money, reinvesting that money into more profitable areas like the rental properties that our goal is to acquire for sake of financial freedom. So I'm very excited to get into it with you. I hope that you're as excited as I am to design just one piece of the overall holistic system that we're desiring to build inside of Notion for managing and planning not only our money, but all of the various aspects of our life and of our learning. Without further ado, empecemos. All right, let's begin with this database right here. Inside of Notion, I've created a new database that I'm calling expense categories. And the purpose of this area inside of Notion is to just get a nice organized summary of all of the things that I'm spending money on and my best guess as to what they're costing me. Some of them are going to be perfect because they're fixed expenses, and others are going to be more estimations based on historical spending or based on just my intuition. And so I'll give you some examples. InMotion hosting. This is a hosting service that you use on the back end of having a website. It costs me $143.88, and it costs me that per 1 year. So estimated monthly, that's a cost of about $11.99. Giving myself an estimated monthly number is a really great way to give a common denominator. If you remember from back in school, taking math, you would have to convert numbers. If you're working with improper fractions or mixed fractions, whatever it was, you have to have a common denominator in order to do, I think it's addition. It's a whole nother, I'd have to switch the mode in which I'm thinking right now. But in math, you have to have a common denominator in order to do certain kinds of mathematical operations. In finance, it's very similar. You have a common denominator. If you have a common denominator, it's a lot easier to compare how this expense of $143.88 a year is relative to a $311.76 expense per 2 years, because you know how much they're costing you on a monthly basis. I hope that makes sense. So that gives me an idea of how much things are actually costing me, and based on how valuable they are to me, I can start to think about whether I want to hold on to them, if it's worth it to cancel them, and having a couple of other things helps me to take action on those 2 things. The key date is where I have, for this one, for example, Hostinger, this is the next payment expected, October of 2027, so that's more than a year and a half out. I don't have to worry about it at all anytime soon. But I just have it there to keep it front of mind so that I know and it doesn't sneak up on me. I can keep an eye on that proactively. And then also I have a links section, which is a really great way to have a quick access button. I'll just click this button and it'll immediately take me. I would have to log in order to access the page, but if I did that, I would immediately be in my hosting your subscriptions area so that I can quickly cancel, negotiate a new price, whatever. I have access to where the control is for spending that money so that I can make those decisions and take action on them immediately. So what you want to do with this database is to think about all the different expense categories that you believe will be helpful in making new decisions moving forward. You don't want to make the mistake of breaking down your expenses too much. Okay, so let me give you some examples of how I'm doing my best to avoid that mistake myself here with this database. With my utilities expense or my expense category, I don't want to break this utilities expense into water, trash, sewer, and gas and electric. I have two different links here you see because they're different providers of those two sets of utility services. So I have access to both of them and I can quickly go and communicate with the people or whatever. But I'm just merging it all together into a utilities expense because it's not relevant to me how much I'm spending on electric versus my other utilities. If my goal was to save money on electric, or if I felt like there was good opportunity for saving a significant amount of money from saving on electric, then yeah, I would maybe I would separate that out and have utilities 1, utilities 2, etc. But I just don't feel like there's a lot of opportunity for making any change there. And so if it's not going to help me change spending behavior or financial behavior, then it doesn't really matter to me. I'm just going to bundle it instead. Okay, on the flip side of that, something like Canva, this Canva Pro or whatever they call it, subscription, I could have bundled into a single expense category with content creator templates and vidIQ and Notion Plus, and I could just bundle those all together and call them subscriptions. But the reason I don't do that is because Canva is an individual line item that I might be interested in just whacking. And that is exactly what I did. When I broke this out and I saw how much I was spending on Canva, it was only like $8 a month, but that's $8 more than I need to be spending if I'm not using the service that much, which I wasn't. Same thing with content creator templates. It was about $20 a month and it's a pretty cool service. Gives me access to a lot of templates for like my videos and websites and things like that. But I'm not really using it that much right now. And so at least for now, it's not worth it to me. Okay, so what we want to do at this stage is to build this out. And then later in the video, I'm going to show you how to connect this database to our transactions database that we built in the last video, so that when we're working through our transactions with our workflow process that we're going to be building as well, when we categorize this, it will be understood. Notion will understand from our transactions database where each of these transactions belongs in terms of the categories that we've designed. And so that we can run analyses on how much we're spending on Canva and how much we're spending on mortgage and what percentage of our overall budget is my car payment eating up, etc. All right, so let's do it. Inside our databases page, which we made in the last video, underneath our transactions database, presumably, we're going to create another new database. We're going to call this expense categories. And then, like always, we're going to give all of the properties first so that then we can begin filling it out without interruption. Okay, so I've gotten all of the properties in place except the last one, the transactions relation. We're going to do that here in just a little bit. But I want to get everything else in place first. The name of the expense, the name of the expense category. The category group, this is like the overall category that an expense falls under. So for example, my mortgage expense category is a category of expenses. Utilities is an expense category, and property taxes, home insurance, all of these fall under home. It's just a nice way to kind of break up the categories a little further that in a way that makes sense to me. And then I've got the budget. That's how much I'm spending on the expense category per whatever frequency it is. Oftentimes it'll be monthly already, but sometimes it'll be like an annual thing if I'm only spending money for TurboTax once a year, or if I'm only doing home insurance, paying that once a year. But then I have the frequency of whether it's a per month, per year, per 6 months, etc. And so then I can have the estimated monthly column, a formula, which will break that number down, the budget plus frequency combo, into what it's costing me on a monthly basis. And as a note, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, because we have this estimated monthly column, we have also a little thing inside of Notion that was pretty cool. We can really quickly and easily sum how much we're spending in each of these category groups. Investments, I'm expecting to pay about $83 a month, $2,000 a month for all housing expenses, auto, etc. All of these are nice and broken up. Or you can also ungroup these, and that way I can see a one number summary of what my current cost of living is as a snapshot. We're going to dive into this number a little more deeply by going into our historical data and seeing how much we're actually spending on these different categories. And we may or may not be surprised, I don't know what we're going to learn, but it'll be just nice to see exactly how much we're spending rather than just having estimates. Okay, and then we've got the key date. The key date could be the next time we're going to pay an expense, but it also might be something different. Like for example, for me, for my car payment, the key date is not the next time I'm going to pay this, it's a monthly expense. The key date for me is the last car payment, and that's obviously very exciting to me because that will wipe out this expense. That's just very exciting to know that's kind of impending. It's around the corner. And then finally, the links section. This is where we're going to be able to house the quick access links to the various categories of expenses that we have, so that, for example, if I noticed a spike in the cost of my utilities, then hey, maybe I want to go to my account where I have my gas and electric service. Okay, well, it's not loading right now, but maybe I want to go to that account and log in and very quickly and easily address that. So you can go ahead and fill in the different categories of expenses that make sense to you. If you wanted to, it might make more sense to you to start with the category groupings so that you can choose, hey, I have a home category expense or category group. I have an auto category group, health and wellness, fun/joy, etc. And then starting here, you can fill in the different expense categories that you expect in each of these areas. Okay, once you're satisfied with the expense categories that you've listed, you can then start to estimate the cost of each one. Don't worry about the frequency of when you pay them yet. Okay, and then we're going to change this to US dollar. And then we're going to ask the question, what kinds of iterations do we have inside of our budget or inside of the range of expense types that we have? For me, I have per 2 years, I have per 2 years, per 1 year, per 6 months, or per 1 month. Those are just the ones that have shown up so far. But if you wanted to add different ones, add them in here and then update our estimated monthly formula, which we're going to make here in just a second, you could do that very easily. But let's go in here and choose which of each of these are. All right, and now based on the iteration or the frequency, we want to see what is that cost per whatever translate to into a common denominator monthly expense to us. So in order to do that, we're going to come up to the estimated monthly field. It's a formula field, so we're going to do edit formula. All right, now I'll go ahead and plan on putting the formula that we need for this database inside of the description of this video. But just be careful, if you have other frequency types in here beyond what I've provided, you're going to have to adjust the formula to include those, and that'll make sense how to do that here in a little bit. But it's also important that you be very precise with how you reference. If you have a slightly different name for the different properties in here, like I haven't changed nombre from Spanish over into name. You're gonna have to change this. Pretty quick and easy to change that, but just make sure if you're using the copy and paste method, if it doesn't work, it could be a very slight change. In Notion is formulas in general, coding is very precision demanding, and so just be aware of that. Okay, we're gonna start by asking ourselves what it is we want Notion to do. In this case, we want Notion to reference two things: the budget of each expense category and the frequency of that expense category. And based on those two things, spit out a number that matches what that number translates to into a monthlyized common denominator, again, according to what the frequency was. So what that means is if I have a monthly per month expense, then the number should just stay the same. If I have a per year expense, then the number should be taken and divided by 12. If it's 6 months, it should be divided by 6, and so on. So it's actually pretty straightforward. What we need is called an ifs function. Ifs takes into account multiple conditions, and based on each particular condition that we specify, a different yield is going to be given according to the logic that we feed into Notion. So the first thing I want Notion to do is look and see what is the frequency column, because that's going to determine everything. So start with the frequency. I want to tell Notion if the frequency column, or if the frequency field in a given row, a given record, is equal to, we're going to start with per 1 month. If it's equal to that, we want the yield in this column, in this estimated monthly row or column or field, to be the budget. We just want you to carry it back over. So we're going to find that here. That's good. Now, if it's something else, let's start with the frequency being equal to per 6 months. Then we want you to take that budget number and divide by 6. Right? I hope that makes sense. The same logic we're going to apply for the frequency being equal to 1 year. Take that budget number and divide by 12. And if it's equal to 2 years, take the budget number and divide by 24. Now, because we have a number field, a number yielding formula, we can change this format from just regular number to US dollar. It looks like I must have made a mistake somewhere, because for our 1 year fields, our 1 year exceptions, we don't have anything written here. It's just blank. So let's go back in and see what I did wrong. I think it might just be because I left a space here. So I'm going to get rid of that. Let's see how that works. Nope. Let's see. Oh, okay. Here's an example of what I mean. The precision that's demanded per 1 year is what is needed. There we go. Okay, so we've got that taken care of. Now we can go ahead and calculate. We might as well, because we have everything needed here. I want a number down here at the bottom that shows me the grand total. You can find that by coming up to this estimated monthly field header and go to calculate. I want to do more options, sum, and then we'll see that sum there at the bottom. The key dates, I'll let you go ahead and fill out those out according to what you want to find or see. One thing I would recommend is changing the format of it from the complete date to month, day, year. That's the way that I like to do it. That's the way we do it here in the States, right? And then same thing with the links. Whatever accounts that you want to have quick access to, toggling on and off those subscriptions or taking a closer look at your utilities, whatever makes sense to you, you can have those different links here for quick access and quick control for changing those easily. Oh, and by the way, the reason I used in this field, the reason I did the kind of field this is files and multimedia. The reason I chose that instead of URL is because with this one, you can house multiple links per record. And so for my utilities expense category, for example, I have the two different providers of the two different kinds of utility sets. Water, trash, and sewer is one company, and gas and electric is a different one. And so I have those two different links, both relevant to the utilities expense category. So that's just a nice way to have a quick and easy button set for accessing them quickly. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to do then before finishing out our last needed field, which is the relations field, which is going to enable us to start making connections between our transactions database and our expense categories database. The last thing I want to do before getting there is creating two different views of this expense categories database. I want to have a grouped view, and that is where I see per category group. I have all of my investments summed up here, all of my home expenses summed up here, auto, health and wellness, etc. And I have an ungrouped version, which is where I see just all of them all at once, and I can see that grand total here at the bottom. So with this one that we've made, this one I might actually just call ungrouped because it's already ungrouped. And then what I'm going to do is create a duplicate view, call this one grouped, and now we can group this. I'm going to come up here to configuration, and we want to group by category group. And you can also edit the order of these. I also don't want to hide empty groups. I always want to show all the ones that I want. I'm going to hide the without a category group. I want to put investments at the top, and then home, and then auto, and then health and wellness, and then fun/joy. You can do that in any way that you want. This just makes the most sense to me. Investments are the most important expense category. Home is probably the most expensive. Auto is maybe the second most expensive, etc. So this is the way that makes sense to me. All right, now the last thing we need to do before getting over into our transactions database and starting to make those connections is to make a relation field. This is a special kind of field inside Notion where we're going to create what's called a relational database. We've actually created the databases themselves already, but we're going to relate them to each other, making them relational databases by creating a relation field inside either the expense categories database or the transactions database, and relating it to the other one and having it be a bidirectional relationship. Doing that on either side will make the field on the other side. And what it will enable us to do is every time we have a transaction, I'm going to be able to categorize that transaction according to the categories that I've specified in my expense categories database. And then in the transactions database, or in different views of it is more accurate to say, we'll start to then be able to create visualizations on and answer different questions. So for example, if I'm spending money on books, that's a category that I've deemed important enough to separate from all of my other merchandise / grocery type expenses. I can have that be a piece of a pie chart, and I can see how much I'm spending on books as compared to how much I'm spending on all of the other things that I'm spending money on. Okay, so what I want is a new property. It's going to be a relation property. I want the transactions database that we made from the last video. All of this is really not that important. We can adjust it as we need to later. I do want it to be a bidirectional relationship. And what that means is on the other side, inside of our transactions database, what we're going to see the column as is expense category, because every transaction is going to fall into just one expense category. Okay, so I'm going to leave this one as named transactions because multiple transactions can belong to each of these categories. And that lines up with this. There's no limit because there can be multiple transactions. There can be as many transactions as we want in each of the categories. But on the other side, the expense category should be a limit of one page because every transaction should only fall into one category. All right, so here inside my dashboard inside Notion, I've talked about different pieces of this dashboard in the past. And if you're curious about any of the pieces, I invite you to just leave a comment. Let me know what you want to see more of, and I would love to dive deeper. But for now, the relevant piece to our project with personal finance is underneath the inboxes section, we have a new transactions section. What I want to do with this transactions section is I want to create a workflow where via bank sync, which actually happens to be the last transaction of my overall financial accounts, which is kind of cool. It's the first time I've paid for it. Via bank sync, the service provider that is pulling our transactions from our financial accounts into our transactions database inside Notion, I want to begin processing these transactions of mine on a daily basis. And so what I imagine is every time I get a new transaction, I'm going to come in here. It's going to automatically tell me where it came from, the account that is, what the transaction name is, what the service was, how much it was, and then of course the date. And what I want to do is every time I see that, I want to give it a category based on the expense categories that we've listed and organized over here in our expense categories section. And because we have them connected, it's going to be the actual expense category, not just the same name, but the actual relation will be to the expense category database. And the kind of like cumbersome part is that if you've pulled in a bunch of historical data and you've not yet had this habit, that's the boat that I am in. I've never had this kind of system in place where I had my transactions being automatically pulled for me into Notion. I never knew that was possible. So when I discovered that it was, I knew I wanted to build this kind of a system. Now that I have that in place, I'm going to kind of backtrack and apply the daily processing that I want to apply moving forward all at once for about a year's worth of historical data. And that's going to be a little bit cumbersome, but the beauty is that once I do that, I only have to do it once, and then moving forward, I only have to do the categorization for the new transactions that come up. And what I've heard, and I haven't verified this with my own experience, but I've heard in watching like tutorials from other YNAB and other YouTubers, they say that even like multi-person families with multiple kids and whatever, the most number of transactions that they have to process in a single day is like 10 at the very most. And so it's really not that bad. And it takes, if you can process a transaction, if I give this bank sync category, if I know ahead of time, really I think the key is if I know ahead of time what my expense categories are, and I have that lined out very cleanly in a database specifically designed to give structure to the overall picture of what my expenses look like and the categories that they fall into and the category groups that they fall into, it's going to be very quick and easy to do that. If I know that my bank sync, where each transaction belongs, then processing 10 transactions doesn't have to take more than a handful of minutes. So I think it's very worth it. What I want this process to look like, I want this workflow inside the dashboard of my Notion, again, to be where every time I get a new transaction, I categorize it and it disappears from view just like you just saw. Because that means that once I've done that, my inbox has been processed. It's no longer, I don't need it in my inbox anymore. And once I've done all of that processing, the idea is all of my transactions have an appropriately assigned category, and I can then begin to run analyses on the transactions database according to the categories that they belong to. So I'm going to start by just kind of going through a handful of these. Thrift Books is my favorite place to buy books from. Withdrawal by check. I know that this is an expense toward my bathroom renovation, and so that's actually a special category that doesn't fall into these recurring expenses. And so I haven't decided yet for sure how I'm going to take that into account, because I think I would rather, if it's not a recurring expense, this investment is for my bathroom renovation, and that bathroom renovation is a one-time investment designed to improve my cash flow. And so it's not like a regular expense, and so I don't know that I want to give it a normal category. So for now, I'm just going to leave it, and we'll worry about it later. I really just want to get an idea of what I'm spending kind of monthly or on a regular basis. So let's just skip that one for now. A refund from USAA. In this case, it's so small, I just really don't even care about it. And so what I've done is I've created this little button over here called ignore. And this is for like if I get, let's say this is a good example. I think this is like a refund for car insurance. If you pay a certain amount and the company's successful enough, they might give you a dividend. I think that's what this is, but it's so small, I just don't even care about it. So I'm not even going to give it a category inside of my expense categories area. Well, and actually, not to mention, it's income. It's not actually an expense, so we're not taking into account those yet anyway. So I'm just going to ignore it for now. We got a USAA auto pay. That's my car insurance, so I can go ahead and give that car insurance category. So you get the idea. You have a process for organizing your transactions, your expenses. We're focusing on we're focusing on expenses right now. You have a process for organizing those according to predefined categories. And once you've done that, again, it'll be a little bit cumbersome to do it for all of your transaction history. But the idea is once you've gone through and given those categories, it's going to be a lot easier moving forward. And you'll be able to start running analyses on the transactions database based on and be able to answer questions like, how much money am I spending on this category? What percentage of my budget is this one taking up? And where are there opportunities for saving and reinvesting money? So what I want to do right now is show you how I created this inbox view. And then I'm going to take some time to just go ahead and go through my transaction history, fill it all out in the way that I like, and I encourage you to do the same. But let's make the transactions inbox real quick. The way that you do that is we already have our transactions database set up, right, from the last video. What I want to do is create a new view. You do a /view or database or list view. I want to list a view of list. And I'm going to specify that I want it to be a view of my transactions database. Okay, by default, it's going to show all of my transactions. I want to narrow that down with a few different filters, or I guess just two. I want the category to be empty, because if it's empty, that means it still needs to be processed. And I also want the ignore button to be empty as well. If it's pressed, then that means I don't need to see it in my inbox anymore. It's been processed to the extent that I want to process it. So if it's empty, it should still be showing. Yes. If it's empty, it should still be showing. Or if it's empty, or if the category is empty. So if either of those is empty, I want to still see it. So you can create a filter. I'm going to create an advanced filter. We've got that the category is blank or the ignore button is blank, one or the other. No, excuse me. It should be and. Both of those need to be true in order for it to show here in my transactions database. In my inbox, if either of them is checked or if either of them is not empty, then it'll disappear from this view, which is what we want. Okay, and then the only other thing that you need to do is just change up the visible fields here. So I have that the ignore button should be over here on the left, visible, the name of the account that the transaction came from, the name of the transaction itself, the amount of the transaction, and then the date of the transaction. That's my personal preference, but you'll see how quick and easy it is inside Notion to update that according to your preferences. I'm going to move the ignore button over here to the left. I've got the name of the account next, and then the name of the transaction, and then the amount, and then the date. Okay. These little icons right here to the left of each transaction I can get rid of very easily with design. Come in here, show the page icon, get rid of that. Okay, and then you'll see that there's a ton of transactions still listed. If you don't want that many transactions to pile up like that, you can also, in the design tab, come down to the loading limit, I think is probably what it's called, and change it down to like 10. You don't need to see more than that. And if you ever do want to see more, you can always, of course, click load more, and it'll load more transactions for you. So like I said, I'm going to take some time to go through my transaction history and process the transactions that I want to process right now, focusing on expenses. What I recommend is that in doing the same for yourself, you skip entirely, meaning you don't click ignore for those transactions that you do care about, you want to categorize in some way, but they just they don't necessarily fit into the regular ongoing expense types that you've specified. And I gave you an example of that one here with my bathroom renovation expense. That's a one-off kind of thing. And I think I might want to account for it a little differently. So I'm just going to skip that for now. And then also, if you have things like paychecks, like this one right here, I got a paycheck, that's income. And so I do want to account for that eventually. And so I'm not going to click ignore, but right now I'm just going to skip over it because it's not really relevant to the expenses, the ongoing expenses that I want to take into account, right? So I want to skip those types of transactions. Anything like that, you can do the same, just skip them. And only ignore, like button pressing ignore, the transactions that you know you don't care to pay attention to. You don't care to take them into account at all. So something like this, where it's super small, is an example. Or down here, if you have where you're paying off a credit card balance, like I did here, I have a payment, which is nothing more than money moving from one of my accounts to another account. So it's not a net positive or negative transaction. It's just a payment. I can ignore those safely as well. I don't want those to be taken into account in my my visualization of my previous spending history. So I'm going to do that right now. I recommend you do the same, and then we'll come back and continue by starting to analyze the data. All right, sweet. So I went through the process of categorizing all of the expense transactions that I care to categorize throughout the history that I chose to get to import, which was all of 2025 and then 2026 data that we have so far. It took a little bit of time. Like I said, it can be a little cumbersome, but the beauty is I only have to do it once, and now moving forward it's gonna be so much easier. You'll see, like you can see on the screen, I have a lot of transactions that I did not process. I just leave them. I've just left them in my inbox. Most of those are paychecks. So these are all paychecks, and it's kind of a different animal. Like my income is something I also want to track and be able to visualize and plan for and things, because I have variable income. I work 2 part-time jobs for sake of having more time for reading and investing and creating this content and things like that. I actually have a video about why I work my 2 part-time jobs. And if you're curious, I'll link it up here in the corner. But regardless, I've got those paychecks coming in, and I don't want to treat those the same way that I treat my expenses, and so they're not going to fit necessarily neatly into the expense categories, especially that I've created so far. I'm sort of half imagining right now creating different category groups for my income types, because I have the multiple jobs and the multiple types of income. I might create different category groups and have this merge into, instead of expense categories, maybe I'll do sort of money flow categories, income / expense categories. But that's all in the future. Right now, I want to point out a couple of things that I noticed while I was going through here. One of the things that are not paychecks, but that I still left unprocessed, were expenses like this, where it says Sam's Club as a Chase card expense. because that's on Chase, I'm not sure what I bought. I don't know if it was gasoline or if it was merchandise/groceries. I'm not talking about inside the store where I'm not sure if I bought like toilet paper or bread or whatever else it might have been. I don't care about that. I would have just merged that all into merchandise/groceries. But with Discover, it specifies when I shop at Sam's Club, it tells me whether I'm doing scan and go or whether I'm getting fuel. And so it's clear which I'm buying. But there was a season, I guess, when I was shopping at Sam's Club with my Chase credit card instead. And I think the reason for that is because on Chase, I have this rotating categories bonus cash back thing where every quarter they change up the categories for which you can get 5% cash back instead of just 2% or 1%. And so I probably was taking advantage of that. And I think it's only for gasoline and not for the in-warehouse purchases. And so it's not clear to me what those were. So my point is, if you have similar transactions, similar expenses where you're just not sure what bucket to put it in, that's totally fine. You can just leave it unprocessed and it's not going to be taken into account in our analyses yet, but that's totally fine. I also have a few other ones that I wasn't sure what I bought or what they were. So like USPS, I don't know what that is. I know what USPS is, but I don't know what I was buying here. $15.35 exactly twice. Just kind of interesting to me. And then another thing I want to point out before getting into the data visualization is, as I was going through here, I noticed that there were certain types of expenses that I wanted to have a category for, but I didn't yet. And so I just simply made new categories, and of course, you're free to do that and make as many as you want. A couple of examples. I have school, which is it's a subscription service that I've had or tried in the past, and I've since canceled it. So I put it in here as just a $0 a month expense because I'm not planning on spending any money on it anytime soon. But I have it there so that I could put those transactions into it. Other investments, those are things, that was a category that turned out to be useful. At first, I was skipping a couple of transactions. Like if you see in here, I've got down here with the PayPal, it's like right there in the middle. The Books tablet, that's my Books Note Max, which I made a video about as well. That purchase, I had to do some digging to figure out what that purchase was because it was like $600. I was like, what the heck? I don't remember spending that. But then I realized. And then once I determined it was the books, I was like, well, what does that really fall into? I don't have anything in here that really fits the nature of that product. And so at first I just skipped over it. But then I noticed a couple of other things that I was like, maybe I can put those in the same sort of bucket. So for example, I've got an Amazon purchase, which was so most of my Amazon purchases are merchandise/groceries. That's where I just lumped it all into. But there was one that was like, I think it was like $1,500, and it was my new laptop, which is an investment for sake of being able to work and things. So I was like, that deserves its own category. Again, my point is, as you're going through, don't feel like you have to have it perfect, even if you miscategorize something and you later want to adjust it. I think a good example of that is my merchandise/groceries category. You can see I have a ridiculous amount of transactions that belong in this category. That tells me, I don't know exactly how much it all adds up to because most of those transactions are probably less than like $40 or $50. But if it's a substantial amount of money, that might be an opportunity for, I want to address that in one of two ways. Either further subdivide merchandise/groceries somehow, whether I do merchandise and groceries, or maybe I divide out merchandise into like toiletries/personal care merchandise versus everything else, or whatever. I don't know. The idea here is not to have everything perfectly organized right away, but to have an organization structure and be able to start spotting those areas where there's opportunity for further optimization. So with all of that said, we've got all of the expenses that we care to categorize at this time categorized. And now what I want to do is, again, coming back to my dashboard. We're going to go into a different area of the dashboard that I call bird's eye views, which I've got a couple of other visualizations and things for. But what I want to create in this video and in this series is a new bird's eye view for our money. So it's going to be kind of like a home base, a visual home base for taking for getting a big picture look at what our money looks like. And it'll continue to evolve. I mean, as far as we're going in this video, we're not going to do everything that's possible. We're just going to get started. So what I want to do first is I want to give myself a handful of sections. So I'm going to give myself, the first section is what I imagine is a series of charts 1 month at a time, where each month I see a pie chart that breaks down what my spending looked like in that month. And so that I can see, this is what percentage of money I spent on my mortgage, this is what percent of money merchandise/groceries cost me, etc. We can do that for every month. Let's do that now. Okay, so to create this view, I'm gonna do a / just like usual. We're gonna do a regular just table view first, link it to our transactions database, because even though our expense categories database, a separate database, is what enables us, it's what's going to enable us to slice and dice the transactions database. It's the transactions database's data that we're actually interested in seeing. And so it's the one that we want to put into our visualization. Okay, so once I've got the database view, not a new database, but just a view, I'm going to change the settings from table to chart. And now, before playing with the settings of the chart, because I need a pie chart and I need to divide it in a certain way and all that, I want to first narrow the data to only see those things that I care about. So I have to first weed out some of the things that I don't want to see. The very first thing is my ignore button should not be selected. It should be unselected. If it's selected, that means that it's something that I chose. I don't want to be taken into account in any of my visualizations, and so it shouldn't be selected. The next thing is, because this is a January chart that we're making first, the date should be between the first and last days of January. I'll also go ahead and rename this to January. Okay, if I come back to my transactions processing area, I think about, okay, what else do I want to weed out? Well, I don't want those transactions that don't have categories. If it doesn't have a category, even if it's an expense, that means that those are expenses that I have not yet given a category. So I don't want to see the ones I haven't decided yet what they belong to. So I'm going to create another filter where the category is not empty. Okay. I might also, because I have all of these income type transactions, if I were to later categorize those, this filter is going to break, or it won't break, but it's not going to filter out my income type transactions. I haven't categorized any of the income type transactions yet, so I can just, this filter would probably be enough, but I might as well also create a filter where I specify that the amounts that I'm interested in are only those that are less than 0, because if they're not less than or equal to 0, then that means that they're in income, and I don't want to see them in this area either, because we're looking at spending monthly expenses by category. Okay, all right, so I think that should be good. This one is here because we don't want to see those. That's like our manual. I want to ignore particular transactions. The date specifies that it's in January. The category being not empty means that we've given it a category, and the amount being non-positive, the amount specified to be negative, means that we're only looking at expenses. So let's now give this some, let's now configure the chart itself. We're going to give it, I guess it's called a donut chart inside of Notion. Pie chart is what I've always, I guess it's a hollow circle. I guess that's why. Okay, so donut chart. What do I want to see as the like rings of the donut? I want to see the category. The category is what's being listed in the legend and what's being broken up by the donut. And I want those slices to represent my amount spent as a sum. Okay, so I've got my January spending. This is how it broke down. I've got 2.1 thousand toward mortgage, which was about 60% of my spending, which is normal. Most people's housing expense is the largest expense by far. I guess that's this whole, I thought it was broken up right here, but yeah, there's this whole little side of the circle right here. I'm curious what this purple one is. Looks like the car payment. That makes sense. We got one for home insurance. That's a little surprising to me, but 10% of my budget goes to home insurance. We've got utilities at 247, which is 7%. So this is all housing right here. I was curious. I wanted to see how much I spent on books because I thought that books might be a good opportunity for saving money. But no, it actually turns out I didn't spend all that much money on books in January, which is good news, I suppose. I think it's good to invest in books though. And I want to feel free to be able to spend money on that. But yeah, it looks like definitely by far my housing was my most expensive category. Let me show you a quick trick of now that we've gotten all of these settings configured. Instead of creating a new chart from scratch, when I want to go to create February and all of the rest of the months, everything is going to stay the same except for the one filter where my date is specified to be January. So I can create an exact duplicate of this view, rename it February, and then the only thing I have to change is, like I said, the date to be, instead of January, February. And now I can see I've got my mortgage at 56%, car payment at 10%, home insurance at about 10%, utilities about 6%, etc. And then all of these other ones all the way down, which is pretty cool. So you get the idea. Another thing I'm curious about is, instead of monthly expenses by category, I wonder if I can make the same view, and I'm sure I can, but instead of the categories that we've specified inside of our expense categories database, I wonder if I can do it by category group, because that would be really helpful to have just the very small handful of category groups that I've specified and see how my spending stacks up against or across all those different categories. So let's see if we can do. Okay, so it doesn't show here, and the reason for that is because the category grouping field is not inside of the transactions database. It's only inside of the expense categories database. So I'm hoping inside of my transactions database, let's see if we can create a roll-up field that will take this category group from our expense categories. Notion will identify what category group does this category belong to, and it'll pull naturally or automatically the appropriate category group. So let's see if I can do that, and then hopefully if it does do that, then we can visualize using it. So roll up, I want to create a roll-up relation based on the category. I want to see the category group, and all I want is to show the original. So that looks good. My fear is that roll-ups might not work inside of Notion charts as expected, but let's give it a try. Yeah, it looks like it's not working. So that might be a project for another day. I do have the data. It's there. in the transactions database, but in Notion, it doesn't allow you to use a roll-up field. So I'm gonna have to play with that, and we'll see if we can create the monthly expenses by category group some other day. Okay, one last thing that I want to show you. Let's say that you're interested in looking at a very particular expense over time. Okay, so I mentioned my merchandise/groceries expense as I was going through the processing. I was getting a ton of merchandise/grocery transactions, and so I want to see what that looks like over time. So I'm imagining one chart instead of broken down by months. I want to see just one chart. The x-axis should be monthly, January through December, or maybe January through the couple months of this year so far. But by month, I want to see a bar chart of how much did I spend on merchandise/groceries in this month, and then this month, and then this month, etc. So let's create a new chart. Actually, again, I realize I don't need to create it from scratch. I can go ahead and pull this mainly because the filters are already going to be largely in place. I don't want the date filter because I want to see all of my transaction history. The category should still not be empty. In fact, it should be specifically merchandise/groceries. It should be a non-positive number because it's going to be an expense. And I'll change the name here in a second. I also want to change the chart type to a bar chart. Vertical is fine. And then I have to change these x-axis and y-axis. On the x-axis, I need to have a date field. I want to have it be a time axis, and so I have to start with the date. We're going to break it down by month. Notion is really cool because you can, if it's a date property, you can use that one date field and change up how you slice up time, which is really amazing. And then on the y-axis, we want to show the total. So I want to show the total of the amount, which would be the sum of how much was spent in each of those months. And then I can change some of this formatting. I don't like that they're all different colors. That doesn't make sense to me. It's all money being spent, so it's red. Ugh, I don't like it. And here we go. This is how much I spent in each of the last handful, about years worth of months. I've got a trend upward over the summer. I seem to be spending more money on merchandise/groceries over the summer. I guess I was cooking more. I do remember experimenting with going to like more, I guess what you might call like bougie restaurants, not restaurants, bougie grocery stores like Natural Grocers or Sprouts, because I'm trying to eat healthier after learning about the impact of diet on your health. I mean, I know when I put it that way, it sounds like stupid, but I'm talking about things like Alzheimer's, diabetes, arthritis. All of these are diseases that modern medicine will tell you need pills for or doctors for, but in the alternative sort of medicine space that I've gotten really fascinated by, the key is food is medicine. And so I guess I was experimenting with that a little bit over the summer, and it seems like my spending has cooled down, which is good. But it's also true that I get paid in cash at one of my jobs, my serving job. And because of that, I spend a lot of my grocery shopping is done with cash, and I don't track those transactions at this time. But moving forward, because I have a way to see my money now, I have a huge incentive to start tracking those transactions. I actually already do track my income, and I'm not talking about just like the income, the paychecks that I have coming into the bank, and I have those records from my bank, and I have the records that I have from my actual employers. I'm not talking about just those records. I actually have a process inside Notion as well where every day and every month I will track how many hours and minutes I worked at my first job, and how many days or whether I worked the day or not as a substitute teacher, and then that'll calculate an estimated amount of earnings for me. So I already do track that, and I also track TR income, one of my job's income, and so I track it in that way. But this is a different database than my transactions database, so I'm still kind of kicking around the idea how to reconcile doing the tracking that I'm already doing, as well as additional tracking most likely, but using this new transactions database and the new processes that I want to have in place based on this emerging picture of like the holistic money tracking and what have you that we're designing right now. Okay, so I just want to make a couple more comments about the spending and like all of the data that you have and all the categorization that you've done now. Moving forward, what I now have access to is really a way to see my data in a lot more ways than just what I've gone over in this video. I mean, you can see how quickly and easily we can create new charts based on the same root data. So really the key to this whole thing is it's not like creating new charts is complex. You don't need a degree to be able to slice and dice this data. Really the key is that you have the data inside of Notion because of BankSync, and I mean, you could do it manually, but BankSync saves you so much time. And you have a way, and you have a process, a workflow inside a home base inside Notion, which you use for not just your transactions, but all the other things that you're doing, like capturing, just a quick example, capturing video ideas very quickly and easily for making YouTube videos. And that is accessible from your phone. And so I have a workflow process now I'm designing, and it'll continue to improve. But I have that in place, and because I have that workflow at the root solidified, or at least it's in process of being solidified, that is what enables me, that's what empowers me to see or to create these visualizations that I can then draw answers from, or conclusion, or they can help me make better decisions because I have a better understanding of the reality that was already there, but I just didn't have access to see. Man, I spent $700 on merchandise/groceries. What was that? I can dive in and look and see what exact transactions were those transactions. And I could see, okay, a lot of Walmart, Natural Grocers, okay, that all makes sense, Sam's. And I look at these transactions and maybe I dive in, maybe I look at the most expensive ones. Let's see if there's any that are more than like $50. There's this one that's, I guess, like $65, but still, the Natural Grocers, that's definitely nothing more than just groceries. But maybe there's other ones. I think there was one that I didn't choose to categorize, but down here, okay, right here. See, so Lowe's, $180. I spent $180 at Lowe's. I didn't even categorize this transaction because I was like, I don't know, is that merchandise/groceries? I don't remember what I spent. Had I had this process in place already, I would have already categorized it at the time that transaction happened, and I would be more aware of what that transaction was. And again, if I really wanted to, I'm sure I could dig through my records and find out exactly what it was and categorize it more appropriately than just simply merchandise/groceries. But regardless, the point I'm trying to make is you can dive in to those areas where there is the most opportunity for improving your financial situation. Praise the Lord. We have established our infrastructure for a personal financial system inside of Notion, a holistic tracking and planning system inside of Notion. We've cleaned up that infrastructure so that we can begin to run some basic analysis on it and start to draw insights into how we're spending our money and what opportunities there are to improve our financial direction. Now, next week, we're planning to now we're further going to design our infrastructure to begin planning ahead of time. How much am I planning to spend next month in this category? Or how much am I planning to spend in total over the next 3 to 6 to 12 months? And ideally, I don't know if I am going to have time to really flesh out the system to this degree by next week, but my hope is eventually I also want to be able to plan how much income am I planning to earn, or is my goal to earn next month or this upcoming year. Because if you earn variable income like myself, I work 2 part-time jobs and I have a rental property and I have ambitions to make money online. Those are different. They're those are not fixed income streams like a person has with a salary. If you're someone with just a salary, planning how much income you're aiming to earn a certain month might not be that helpful. Although maybe you have a side hustle, or maybe you're planning on building one or in the process of building one. And in that case, this planning forward your goals for your income could be very helpful. So what I imagine is essentially on both the income and the expense side, I want to be able to give a number. I want to say, this is how much I want to spend at most in this category. Or on the flip side, this is how much I would like to earn at least from this income stream, from this income source. And then after declaring that those are my goal in, say, April of 2026 or the next month, whenever you're watching this, that being the goal, where am I in terms of that goal so far this month? And what's the difference? Am I meeting the goal, or have I fallen short of it? And that would of course give you the insight to address whatever situation you needed to address. So stick around for part 3, where we're going to be going into that more planning forwardly side of the whole equation. And this is where that parallel between YNAB and our personal finance system is really going to come together. And if you got value out of the video, don't forget to drop a quick like. It really does support the channel. Hasta la próxima, estudiantes de todo.